The rain that morning didn't cleanse Harlem. It didn't wash the sidewalks pure or rinse the soot from the brownstones lining 125th Street. It only made the grime shine. It turned dust into slick black paste and left the gutters whispering secrets to the storm drains. It was a cold Tuesday in November, 1965. The kind of morning that felt heavy before a single word was spoken. The sky sagged low over Lenox Avenue, bruised purple and gunmetal gray, as if it were leaning down to watch. On the corner, a yellow school bus idled. Its engine coughed in steady rhythm, diesel smoke curled into the wet air, the folding doors hissed open, then closed again with a mechanical sigh. Inside, 20 children sat too still. Not laughing, not nudging, not whispering about homework. They wore pressed slacks and bleached white shirts so bright they seemed to defy the weather, patent leather shoes polished to mirror shine, Sunday clothes on a Tuesday. Each one held a chessboard on their lap. Like a shield. This wasn't a field trip to the zoo. This wasn't a museum day. This was a crossing. They were the Harlem Honors chess team, the brightest minds from 3 junior high schools, ages 10 to 14, hand-picked for discipline, composure, and the kind of quiet brilliance that didn't shout but calculated. They were heading to a state championship tournament in Queens, a neighborhood where welcome signs did not apply to them. At the front of the bus stood Mrs. Gable. History teacher, chaperone, a woman who carried dignity like armor. Usually, her voice filled a room with calm authority. Today, it was steady, but her fingers trembled around the clipboard she held against her chest. "All right, everyone," she said softly. "Remember what we practiced. Eyes forward, no engaging anyone outside the bus. If we stop, you stay seated." She paused. "You are ambassadors of Harlem. You are kings and queens. Do not let anyone pull you from your throne." In the third row, a small hand rose slowly. Leo, 12 years old, a prodigy, could see checkmate 5 moves ahead. Right now, he couldn't see through the fog on the window. "Mrs. Gable," he whispered. "Yes, Leo." "My mama said she said the men in the white hoods sent a letter. She said they're gonna burn the bus." The air tightened. A ripple of fear slid down the aisle like a cold draft. Mrs. Gable forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your mother worries because she loves you," she said gently, "but we have Mr. Henderson." At the wheel, Mr. Clarence Henderson did not turn around. 30 years behind the wheel of New York buses, a deacon at Abyssinian Baptist Church, a man who believed in order and scripture. But his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He had seen the letter too. Pinned to the school door that morning in jagged red ink. "Turn around or burn." He had taken it to the precinct. The desk sergeant, pale face like cold ham left too long on ice, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Out of our jurisdiction, Henderson," the officer muttered. "If you folks want to go where you aren't wanted, that's your business. We're not assigning an escort for a chess match." And so they were alone. A yellow tin can filled with brilliance, rolling toward hostility. Or so they thought. "Close the door, Mr. Henderson." The voice came from the back. Low, gravelly, smooth like a cello played underground. It wasn't loud, but it silenced the bus. Every head turned. Across the back bench, the long seat that stretched from window to window, sat a solitary figure wrapped in shadow. Charcoal gray trench coat. Fedora pulled low. A copy of the Amsterdam News opened wide in steady hands. Large hands manicured still as marble. The children didn't know him. Not truly. They had heard stories whispered on stoops, about a man who fought Italians, fought police, fought fate, a man who owned nights the way landlords own buildings. Mrs. Gable knew. She had gone to 22 West Restaurant the night before. Walked past cigar smoke in sharp suits. Past the men who laughed too loudly and carried silence in their eyes. She reached the back table. The king of Harlem was playing chess. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. He moved a knight. Sipped coffee. Listened. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for violence. She asked for passage. He looked at her over the board. 2 words. "What time?" Now he was here. The bus pulled away from Lenox Avenue. For the first 20 minutes, it felt like a parade. Shopkeepers stepped outside to wave. The barber raised his razor in salute. The woman selling bean pies blew kisses through the rain. They knew about the tournament, it was pride. The children sat taller. In the back, Bumpy Johnson turned a page of his newspaper. Snap! Leo turned in his seat. He stared. Bumpy lowered the paper an inch. Dark eyes met young ones. You play the Sicilian defense, son? Bumpy asked. Leo blinked. Yes, sir, sometimes. Aggressive, Bumpy murmured. Good, but be careful with your queen. Don't bring her out too early. Fight for the center, control the middle of the board, the edges take care of themselves. Yes, sir. Turn around, Bumpy said gently. A king never looks back in fear, he looks forward to conquest. Leo turned forward. Sat straighter. Clutched his board tighter. He didn't know why, but the man in the back felt heavier than the bus itself. They passed the Apollo Theater. They passed the Hotel Teresa. And then the landscape changed. Brownstones became warehouses. Friendly faces became empty sidewalks. The bus approached the edge of Harlem, that invisible line everyone felt but no one marked on a map. Ahead lay the bridge to Queens. But first came the gullet. A stretch of access road near the river, old factories, a scrapyard, dead streetlights. The city held its breath there. The rain thickened. Wipers thacked in nervous rhythm. Visibility's poor, Henderson muttered. Keep moving, Bumpy said from the back, don't slow down. I can barely see, Mr. Johnson. That's why you don't stop, Bumpy replied. Wolves like the fog. The bus entered the underpass beneath the train tracks. Dark. Echoing. Rain amplified against concrete. Then, headlights exploded in front of them. High beams blinding white. A rusted pickup truck lunged sideways from behind a pillar, tires screaming on wet asphalt, sliding across both lanes. Jesus, Henderson slammed the brakes. The bus shrieked. Children screamed. Chess pieces scattered like fleeing soldiers. The bus stopped inches from the truck's bumper. In the rearview mirror, two more trucks roared from the alley behind. Boxed in. A perfect pincer movement. 20 men poured from the vehicles. Boots splashing. Denim jackets soaked dark. Some wore white hoods with crude eye holes. Others bandanas. Baseball bats. Chains. Tire irons. One man carried a sledgehammer. A torch hissed alive in the rain. They didn't shout at first. They just hit the bus. Thump. Metal rang like a bell. Crash. A chain cracked the windshield, spiderwebbing glass in front of Henderson's face. The children collapsed into the aisle screaming. Get down, Mrs. Gable threw herself over two girls. Leo slid under his seat, clutching his king piece so tight it cut his palm. At the door, a giant man in a sleeveless flannel tapped a crowbar against the glass. Tink, tink, tink. Open up, boy, he roared. We got a toll for this road. The mob laughed. They began rocking the bus in unison. The suspension groaned. The bus swayed violently. Open it or we burn it, someone screamed. The crowbar jammed into the folding doors. Metal creaked. The lock strained. He's breaking in, Leo cried. In the back of the bus, a newspaper folded neatly. Precisely. Bumpy Johnson stood. He didn't rush. He didn't run. He walked forward, slow and inevitable, trench coat swaying, stepping over huddled children without looking down. The doors gave way with a metallic pop. Wind and rain rushed in. The mob leader stepped onto the first stair, crowbar raised. All right, you littles. He stopped. He wasn't looking at a trembling bus driver. He wasn't looking at a crying teacher. He was looking at a tailored Italian suit. He looked up. And up. Bumpy Johnson filled the doorway. He looked down at the masked man with something colder than anger. Disgust. The bus fell silent. You lost, Bumpy asked quietly. The mob leader hesitated. Who the hell are you, Grandpa? Move, we want the kids. Bumpy reached into his coat. The crowbar lifted. Don't try it. Bumpy's hand emerged holding a gold Zippo. Click. Flame. A thick Havana cigar met fire. He inhaled. Exhaled blue smoke into the man's masked face. You made a mistake, Bumpy said. The leader sneered. Yeah, we got numbers, we got fire, you're one old man. Bumpy smiled. A shark smile. The mistake, he said softly, is thinking this is a school bus. The leader laughed. Looks like one to me. Bumpy leaned closer. It's yellow, it's got children. A pause. No, Bumpy whispered. This isn't a school bus. It's a hearse. The leader blinked. For who? Bumpy snapped his fingers. Once. Sharp. Echoing in the underpass. For one heartbeat, nothing. Then shadows dropped from the trestle above. Thud. 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 Men in long coats with Thompson submachine guns landed on the roof. From drainage ditches, figures rose holding shotguns. Behind the mob's trucks, headlights flicked on. A black Lincoln Continental rolled forward, flanked by 2 Cadillacs. 30 of Harlem's hardest men formed a perfect circle. Johnny Bird stood at the front, shotgun resting easy in his massive hands. Red Dillard spun a switchblade. They weren't masked. They wanted to be seen. The mob leader slowly turned. His crowbar slipped from his hand. You, he stammered. You're Bumpy. From the driver's seat, Henderson whispered in awe. That's Bumpy Johnson. The name hit like a punch. Bumpy removed the cigar from his mouth. Drop it. The crowbar clattered. Step off the bus. The leader obeyed. And the predators became prey in 10 seconds. Rain fell like punishment from the Harlem sky. Not a gentle drizzle, not a passing shower. A cold, soaking, bone-deep rain that turned Lenox Avenue into a river of mud and neon reflection. And in the middle of it stood Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. No umbrella. No coat over his head. No rushing for cover. Just standing there. Across the street under the awning of a pharmacy, a group of young stick-up boys laughed. They weren't laughing loud enough for witnesses, just loud enough for him to hear. One of them, a skinny kid with too much mouth and not enough scars, stepped forward. Hey Bumpy, he shouted, heard Queens run in Harlem now. The street went still. You have to understand something about Harlem in that era. Reputation wasn't about ego, it was oxygen, it was currency, it was survival. And that kid had just tried to snatch it in broad daylight. Rain streamed down Bumpy's face, but he didn't wipe it away. He just looked at the boy. Long enough to make the laughter die in his throat. Then Bumpy did something nobody expected. He turned his back. And he walked away. Slow. Deliberate. Humiliated in the rain. Or so it seemed. But men who understood Bumpy knew something the boys didn't. He never answered disrespect in public. He answered it in private. And when he did, it echoed. That night, deep inside a cramped backroom kitchen off 132nd Street, steam from boiling collard greens fogged the windows. A card game was in full swing, cigarette smoke hung heavy, jazz crackled low from a radio. The skinny kid was there. Laughing again. Until the back door opened. Nobody heard footsteps. Nobody heard the hinges. They only felt the temperature change. Bumpy stepped inside. No entourage. No raised voice. Just presence. He walked past the card table, past the stove, and stopped behind the kid's chair. The room went silent except for the hiss of boiling water. Bumpy leaned down close, so close the boy could feel his breath against his ear. His voice was barely above a whisper. You laughed in the rain. The kid swallowed. You thought that was weakness. A pause. You ever seen a man drown in shallow water? The boy didn't answer. Bumpy straightened up, patted him on the shoulder gently, almost fatherly, and walked out the same way he came in. No threats. No shouting. No witnesses to violence. Just a whisper. And in Harlem, whispers were deadlier than gunshots. By morning, the skinny kid had disappeared. Nobody asked where. 3 days later, a black Cadillac rolled out of Harlem heading toward Queens. Inside were 2 of Bumpy's men. And a man who thought he was being honored. A mid-level Queens operator, ambitious, slick, eager, had been spreading a rumor that Harlem was unstable, that protection money should start flowing east. He'd been invited to talk business. The ride was quiet. Too quiet. They crossed the bridge, city skyline shrinking behind them. The operator adjusted his tie. You tell Mr. Johnson I'm ready to work, he said. One of Bumpy's men glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Oh, he knows. They didn't take him to a restaurant. They didn't take him to an office. They took him to an empty warehouse lot near the water. That's when the operator realized something was wrong. "Where's Bumpy?" he asked. A car door opened. And then, another one. From the shadows stepped Bumpy himself. He had followed. He always followed. He walked up to the operator, rain from earlier still clinging to the hem of his coat. "You wanted Harlem," Bumpy said calmly. The man tried to smile. "I wanted partnership." Bumpy nodded. "Then let's partner on truth." He motioned toward the skyline visible across the river. "That's my home, you don't speak on it unless you're ready to bleed for it." The operator's voice cracked. "I didn't mean no disrespect." Bumpy studied him. Then something unexpected happened. He told his men to put him back in the car and drive him home. Alive. Confused, shaken, terrified. But alive. Because sometimes fear was more powerful than death. And Bumpy wanted Queens to talk. While Queens focused on the meeting, something else was unfolding. Back in Harlem, during all the attention on bridges and rumors, Bumpy's real move had already been set in motion. The rain humiliation. The kitchen whisper. The Queen's escort. All of it was theater. Because while eyes were looking outward, he was cleaning house inward. A new player had been siphoning money from inside Lenox Terrace operations, quietly, carefully, almost invisibly. Almost. Bumpy didn't chase noise. He followed numbers. And the numbers didn't lie. The humiliation in the rain, it baited the reckless. The whisper, it silenced the reckless. The Queen's spectacle, it distracted the ambitious. And during the chaos, Bumpy's men were gathering proof. Ledgers, testimonies, hidden envelopes. By the time the traitor realized what was happening, it was too late. It happened just before dawn. A blast that shook windows from 129th to 135th. Smoke rose over Lenox Terrace. People poured into the streets in night clothes, whispering, shouting. Police sirens cut through the morning air. Official reports would later call it a gas line accident. That's what the papers said. But in Harlem, people knew better. The apartment that exploded belonged to the man who had been moving money off the books. The one who thought Bumpy was distracted. He survived. Barely. Burned, broken, unable to speak above a rasp. And when officers asked what happened, he said nothing. Because even in pain, he understood something. The rain had not been weakness. It had been strategy. The whisper had not been mercy. It had been warning. And the explosion. That was punctuation. Harlem didn't laugh at Bumpy Johnson anymore. Not in the rain. Not anywhere. Smoke still hung over Lenox Terrace when detectives arrived for the third time that week. Coincidence? Maybe once. Twice. Unlikely. 3 times. Now it was a pattern. And patterns get attention. An unmarked sedan idled 2 blocks away. Inside sat 2 federal men who had been waiting years for something like this. Because whenever something explodes in Harlem and elsewhere, Bumpy Johnson is still standing afterward. It means a message was sent. And messages create trails. One of the agents lit a cigarette and said quietly, "He's moving." The other nodded. Good, let him. They had learned something about Bumpy over the years. You don't catch him when he's loud. You catch him when he's reorganizing. And that explosion, that wasn't chaos. It was restructuring. The man in the apartment wasn't the architect. He was the courier. The real betrayal ran deeper. 2 floors below the burned unit lived a quiet accountant named Harold Briggs. Glasses, soft voice, church on Sundays, never missed rent. Invisible. Exactly the kind of man Bumpy trusted around numbers. For 5 years, Briggs balanced Harlem's books with surgical precision, every percentage accounted for, every payout clean. Until Bumpy noticed something microscopic. Not money missing. Money late. Just enough delay to earn interest somewhere else. Interest that didn't belong to Harlem. Bumpy didn't confront him immediately. He waited. Watched. Tracked patterns. Because betrayal isn't proven with anger. It's proven with math. And once the numbers confirmed it, the explosion made sense. It wasn't punishment. It was smoke. While everyone stared at flames, Briggs tried to move. Tried to pack documents. Tried to disappear. But the hallway was already occupied. Two men leaning casually against the wall. No weapons visible. They didn't need any. Mr. Johnson would like a conversation. Briggs' hands started shaking. Because explosions scare civilians. But invitations from Bumpy. Those terrified businessmen. It wasn't a dungeon. It wasn't chains and theatrics. It was a church basement. Neutral ground. Symbolic ground. Bumpy sat at a folding table under a single bulb. Briggs was placed across from him. On the table. Ledgers. Every altered entry highlighted in red. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. 5 years, he said quietly, you stole in teaspoons. Briggs tried to speak, but his throat was dry. I was going to put it back. Bumpy leaned forward. That's what drowning men say. Silence. Then something unexpected. Bumpy slid a piece of paper across the table. A confession. Typed. Neatly formatted. Briggs stared at it. If you sign, Bumpy said calmly, you live. Briggs blinked. And if I do? Bumpy didn't answer. He didn't need to. The pen felt heavier than a gun. Briggs signed. And with that signature, Bumpy accomplished 3 things. He secured proof. He reclaimed stolen leverage. He created insurance. Because if the feds ever got close, he now had someone closer to offer them. Meanwhile, uptown politics were changing. City Hall didn't care about whispers. They cared about headlines. An explosion in Harlem housing complex was a headline. Pressure came down through precinct captains. One name kept resurfacing in closed meetings. Bumpy Johnson. Even though no witness ever placed him at anything. That was his genius. He was gravity. You couldn't see it. But everything bent around it. A young city councilman looking to make a name for himself demanded a crackdown. More patrols. More raids. More visible force. Harlem suddenly felt different. Not dangerous. Occupied. And Bumpy noticed. Because power isn't just about controlling criminals. It's about understanding politicians. This wasn't local anymore. This was federal curiosity. The same bureau that had once chased Al Capone for tax evasion understood something simple. You don't take down kings with bullets. You take them down with paperwork. Agents began interviewing small players. Pressuring weak links. Flipping fringe operators. And for the first time in years, someone talked. Not about violence. Not about drugs. About structure. How money flowed. How messages moved. How Bumpy never touched anything directly. It was the closest law enforcement had ever gotten to the architecture. And architecture can be dismantled. Slowly. Brick by brick. Harlem didn't see the stress. They saw a calm man in tailored suits. They saw stability. They saw protection. They didn't see the sleepless nights. The maps on tables. The lists of who could fold under pressure. Power isolates. Because when everyone fears you, no one truly speaks freely around you. And Bumpy understood something terrifying. The more precise his system became, the more fragile it was. One wrong loyalty. One desperate informant. One ambitious federal prosecutor. And Harlem's entire structure could collapse. That's the cost of ruling. Not violence. Responsibility. Bumpy called a private meeting. Not with enforcers. Not with accountants. With his oldest circle. Men who had stood with him before headlines. Before explosions. Before whispers. He looked each of them in the eye. No more noise, he said calmly. No more independent moves. If the feds breathe, I want to know before they exhale. This wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Then he did something rare. He asked a question. Who's tired? Silence filled the room. Because that wasn't weakness. That was invitation. One man finally spoke. We stand. Bumpy nodded. Not because he believed them blindly, but because loyalty, like fear, has to be renewed. And as the rain began falling again over Harlem that night, the streets didn't laugh. They watched. Because something bigger than humiliation, bigger than explosions, bigger than whispers, was coming. And when it arrived, it wouldn't be loud. It would be final. The men in Washington weren't emotional. They weren't humiliated in the rain. They weren't threatened in kitchens. They were patient. In a quiet federal office downtown, a prosecutor pinned photographs across a corkboard: Harlem streets, bank slips, associates, surveillance stills. At the center of it all, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Not because they could prove anything, but because everything connected back to him. The prosecutor tapped the board lightly. "Stop trying to catch him committing a crime," he said. "Prove he benefits from every crime." That changed the entire game. They weren't building a murder case. They were building a control case. Conspiracy, tax irregularities, interstate movement of funds. The kind of charges that don't require a smoking gun. Just structure. And Bumpy had built a structure. A beautiful one. Which meant it could be mapped. The first crack didn't come from an enforcer. It came from a driver. A small man named Calvin Reese. He transported envelopes, nothing flashy, no guns, no speeches. Just roots. He was picked up on a routine traffic stop leaving the Bronx. Inside the trunk. Nothing illegal. But inside his glove compartment. A ledger page. One page. Enough. Reese sat in a gray interrogation room for 8 hours. No shouting. No threats. Just photographs. Pictures of his mother's apartment building. His younger brother's school. His girlfriend entering a grocery store. "We're not threatening you," the agent said calmly. "We're explaining consequences." By hour 9, Reese asked for water. By hour 10, he asked for a deal. And by midnight, he was explaining how messages traveled without ever touching Bumpy's hands. It wasn't enough for indictment. But it was architecture. And architecture leads upward. Bumpy felt it before he saw it. Roots disrupted. Envelopes late. Faces tense. He called a meeting in a back room off 125th. No anger. Just questions. "Who got stopped?" he asked. Silence. That told him everything. Because loyalty doesn't hesitate. Fear does. He dismissed the room early. That was the first time in years he left a meeting without clear answers. And when a king doesn't have answers, the board is shifting. The Bureau made a mistake. They got greedy. Instead of letting Reese operate quietly as an informant, they pushed him too fast. Asked him to wear a wire. Asked him to attend a sit-down. Reese agreed. But he was nervous. And nervous men sweat. When he entered the meeting spot, a modest apartment near Lenox Avenue, Bumpy wasn't inside. Only 2 of his oldest lieutenants. They spoke casually. Too casually. Reese kept adjusting his jacket. One lieutenant noticed. Not the wire. The behavior. Halfway through the conversation, the lieutenant stood and locked the door. Reese froze. The other man leaned back and said quietly, "You been cold lately, Calvin." Reese tried to laugh. "I'm fine." "No," the man replied, "you been cold." Then he tapped the table. Twice. The signal. From the bedroom doorway, Bumpy stepped out. He had been there the entire time. Watching. Measuring. Not angry. Just disappointed. "You don't sweat in winter," Bumpy said softly. Reese's shoulders collapsed. The room felt smaller. He didn't deny it. Didn't fight it. He just whispered. "They showed me my mother." That landed heavier than betrayal. Because now this wasn't greed. It was survival. And survival complicates punishment. Bumpy dismissed his lieutenants. He sat alone with Reese. 10 long minutes. No threats. Just silence. Finally Bumpy spoke. "You think they save you after you testify?" Reese stared at the floor. "They use you, then they lose you." He wasn't wrong. The Bureau protects assets. But it doesn't love them. Bumpy slid something across the table. Not a gun. Not money. A train ticket. Southbound. "Take your mother, leave tonight, never come back." Reese looked up stunned. "And if I do?" Bumpy's voice didn't change. "Then they bury you or I do, and I promise I'm quicker." Reese left that night. No testimony. No wire. No arrest. The Bureau lost their closest ladder upward. But something shifted. Because Bumpy had just shown mercy. And mercy creates something dangerous in organizations built on fear. It creates questions. Harlem feels the pressure. Patrol cars increased along Lenox Avenue. Raids on gambling spots. Small arrests. Nothing major. But enough to suffocate rhythm. Businesses started whispering. Is it worth it? Because protection only works if it protects. And now the federal government wasn't trying to knock down the building. They were shaking the foundation daily. Harlem's king still stood. But the ground beneath him vibrated. Bumpy gathered his inner circle again. Smaller this time. No extended players. No drivers. Just core blood. He made an announcement. We reduce. Confusion spread across the room. We cut roots, cut exposure, cut noise. One lieutenant objected. That looks weak. Bumpy shook his head. It looks disciplined. He understood something most street leaders never do. Expansion brings attention. Contraction preserves power. He was willing to earn less to survive longer. That decision would save him temporarily. But it would also create a vacuum. And vacuums attract ambition. Because when a king pulls back, princes start imagining crowns. In the distance, quietly, patiently, a younger operator began consolidating influence. Not loud. Not flashy. Learning from Bumpy's precision. Watching federal patterns. Studying restraint. The streets didn't know it yet. But a transition was forming. Not through violence. Through evolution. And Bumpy felt it. Because rulers don't fear enemies. They fear time. And time was the one opponent he couldn't intimidate. It didn't happen in a gunfight. It didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened quietly. Inside a restaurant on 7th Avenue. Mid-conversation. Mid-sentence. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson paused. Not dramatically. Just long enough for the man across from him to say, "You all right?" Bumpy blinked slowly. His hand tightened around his coffee cup. Then it passed. He finished the meeting. Paid the bill. Walked out like nothing happened. But the men who'd been around him long enough noticed something they had never seen before. Fatigue. Not physical weakness. Something deeper. As if the weight of Harlem had finally decided to collect interest. The younger blood tests the water. Power, when it appears vulnerable, invites curiosity. A younger crew, ambitious, sharp, impatient, began moving small weight without approval. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to test the edges. They weren't rebelling. They were measuring. They'd grown up under Bumpy's order. They respected it. But they hadn't built it. And men are always more reckless with inherited power. Word reached Bumpy quickly. He didn't summon them immediately. He waited. Because he wanted to see if they corrected themselves. They didn't. So he called for a sit-down. No enforcers in the room. Just chairs. 4 young men walked in. Confident. Controlled. They believed they were the future. Bumpy looked at them for a long moment. You think I don't see you, he said calmly. No one answered. You moving small, he continued, trying not to disturb the water. Still silence. Then one of them, bold, maybe foolish, spoke. We just expanding opportunity. There it was. Ambition disguised as progress. Bumpy leaned back. You know why Harlem survived? They didn't. Because I never mistook growth for strength. The room shifted. He wasn't threatening them. He was educating them. But education feels like warning when delivered by a king. You want the future, Bumpy said quietly, earn it without burning what built it. He dismissed them without punishment. And that mercy spread through the streets faster than violence ever could. Some saw wisdom. Others saw weakness. That divide would matter. Federal frustration turned tactical. They stopped chasing Bumpy directly. Instead, they targeted everything around him. Licenses questioned. Businesses audited. Associates subpoenaed. It wasn't about arrest. It was about exhaustion. The same strategy once used against Al Capone, not bullets, not bravado. Paper. Pressure. Persistence. A federal agent who had chased Bumpy for years summarized it perfectly. We don't need him loud, we need him tired. And tired was something new. February air cut through the city. Cold. Sharp. Bumpy sat in his favorite restaurant again. The same corner table. The same coffee. Across from him, a longtime friend laughed at something he'd just said. And then silence. Not the dramatic kind. The final kind. His hand slipped from the cup. His body leaned back. No gunshots. No sirens. Just stillness. The king of Harlem had ruled through storms, betrayals, indictments, explosions, whispers. And in the end, his heart stopped. Right there at the table. No spectacle. No courtroom defeat. No assassination headline. Just time. News traveled like electricity. From 125th Street to the edges of Queens. People stepped out of shops. Radios turned up. Windows opened. Some cried. Some stood quietly. Even those who had feared him understood something undeniable. Order had existed. And now it didn't. At his funeral, the crowd stretched for blocks. Politicians attended. Street figures attended. Ordinary residents attended. Because whatever else he was, he had been a constant. And in neighborhoods built on uncertainty, constants feel like protection. Remember the younger crew. The ones testing boundaries. Now there was no one to correct them. No singular gravity holding ambition in orbit. Harlem didn't explode immediately. It shifted. Subtle at first. Then louder. Because leadership isn't just about control. It's about restraint. And restraint died with him. History would debate him. Was he protector? Predator? Strategist? Symbol? The truth. He was all of it. He understood humiliation could be theater. Whispers could be weapons. Explosions could be punctuation. But most importantly, he understood power isn't volume. It's calculation. And calculation is exhausting. By the time he left that restaurant table for the last time, he had outlasted rivals, outmaneuvered federal traps, contained internal betrayal, and taught a generation how power really moves. Quiet. Precise. Relentless. Closing beat. Rain fell over Harlem again days after his funeral. Soft this time. No laughter in it. Just memory. Because whether people loved him or feared him, they knew something had ended. An era built not on noise but on nerve. And Harlem would never sound the same again. If you made it this far, you'd understand Thar power isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for attention. It moves in silence. It calculates. It waits. And the stories they don't teach you. The real chess matches behind the headlines. The wars fought without gunshots. That's what we uncover here. Not the myths. The mechanics. So don't just watch, stand with us by subscribing. Because the next story, you'll be thrilled.